My name is Claire Dawson, and I'm 35. I never thought I'd be respected in a courtroom but invisible in my own home. I'd just wrapped up a complicated case. People applauded, cameras flashed, but hours later at my father's birthday dinner, I was once again the quiet one in the corner. My sister Lena was talking loudly about her fiancé's new promotion. Then she turned to me. "Still working that government desk job, huh?" She smirked. "Must be nice to have so much free time." My parents didn't say a word. They just kept eating. I smiled politely, but inside it stung. And that's when I realized being brilliant outside means nothing if you're unseen inside your own family. Before I share more, let me know where you're watching from. Tap like and subscribe if you've ever felt overlooked, even by those who were supposed to love you most. Let me take you back to where it all began. I've always believed in order, in justice, in the power of truth. That's why I became a judge. I remember standing in that courtroom just hours before the dinner. The gallery was packed. A messy custody battle between two high-profile parents had dragged on for months. Lawyers argued, reporters hovered, and the entire city seemed to be watching. But when I delivered the verdict, the room went still. I gave the child to her mother, a quiet woman who'd been underestimated from the beginning. Some called it bold, others called it controversial. I just called it fair. As the mother wept with relief and the reporters swarmed outside the courthouse, I walked out through the side door. No makeup artist, no PR team, no champagne. Just me, my briefcase, and the echo of my own heels. That's the part no one sees. But I didn't mind. I've never done this job for attention. Later that evening, I changed into a navy dress and drove to my parents' house for Dad's 70th birthday. It was supposed to be a simple dinner, family only, just the five of us. But from the moment I walked in, I felt it. The silence when I entered. The way Mom glanced at my outfit, then looked away. The way Lena was already mid-story about Connor, her fiancé, closing some deal in San Diego. I sat down quietly at the end of the table. Lena barely paused. "She's so lucky to have a man like him," Mom said, smiling at Lena. "Ambitious, focused, knows what he wants." She didn't look at me when she said it. I reached for my glass of water, keeping my face steady. I'd heard it all before. Then Lena turned to me. "What about you, Claire? Still doing that court thing?" I nodded. "I'm still a judge, yes." She laughed like I'd made a cute joke. "Must be nice. Job security, light hours, government benefits." Dad cut into his steak. He didn't say a word. That was the thing about my family. The insults didn't come with shouting. They came dressed in politeness, smiles, silence. I'd spent years trying to earn their approval. Top of my class, law degree from Columbia, youngest female judge appointed in the state. But none of it seemed to matter once I walked through that front door. To them, I was still the quiet one, the one without a ring, the one who chose work over family. At first, I thought if I just achieved more, they'd see me, hear me. But now, I'm not so sure they ever wanted to. Later that night, as I helped clear the dishes, my mom leaned over and whispered, "Don't bring up work so much next time. It makes Lena uncomfortable." I looked at her, stunned. I hadn't said more than 10 words the entire evening, but I didn't argue. I just smiled and took another plate to the sink. That's the thing about being invisible. After a while, you learn how to make yourself smaller, just to keep the peace. But something changed in me that night. Not all at once, not in anger, just a quiet awareness that I didn't belong in that space, not because I wasn't enough, but because they refused to see me. That realization, it hurt, but it was also the beginning. The next morning I was back in court, black robe, no jewelry, hair tied neatly at the nape of my neck. That's how I liked it. Simple, focused. I stood behind the bench, gavel in hand, looking out across the room at people waiting for justice. Some nervous, some angry, some barely holding it together. They all looked to me for clarity. It's strange, isn't it? In this courtroom, I'm listened to, respected. My words carry weight. People rise when I enter. Lawyers address me as Your Honor. They don't cut me off. They don't smirk when I speak. They don't compare me to someone flashier sitting beside me at a dinner table. In here, I exist fully. That day, I oversaw a hearing about a family business dispute. Two brothers were fighting over ownership after their father passed. Decades of resentment boiled beneath every word they spoke. One accused the other of manipulation, the other accused back with betrayal. I listened carefully. Not just to the facts, but to what was underneath, the fear of not being chosen, of not being trusted. It was familiar. When the proceedings ended, one of the attorneys, a man twice my age, approached me as we exited the courtroom. "Judge Dawson," he said, "I've seen a lot of judges come and go. You handled that with grace. Your father must be proud." It caught me off guard. I thanked him, of course, but inside, something twisted. He didn't know my father. He didn't know the dinner I'd sat through just 12 hours before, where my achievements were invisible and my presence barely tolerated. Proud? My father hadn't looked me in the eye all evening. He'd asked Connor about his new job twice. He hadn't asked me a single question. Not about my docket. Not about my latest ruling. Not even about how I was doing. I don't think he meant to hurt me. That was the hard part. It's easier to face cruelty than indifference. At least cruelty feels deliberate. Indifference? That seeps in slowly, quietly, until one day you look up and realize you've been trying to earn love that was never offered freely. After the hearing, I stopped at a quiet cafe near the courthouse. I took my coffee to go and sat on a bench outside, under a tree just beginning to turn gold with autumn. I scrolled through my phone, emails, court memos, a message from a colleague thanking me for mentoring her on a tough case, and then a text from Lena. "Don't take last night personally, you're just intense sometimes." Intense. That's what they always called me when I didn't laugh at their jokes or when I corrected a fact they got wrong, when I asked deeper questions or stayed quiet in loud rooms. But maybe I am intense. Maybe that's why I see things others don't. Why I sit with truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Why I fight for people who've been made to feel small, because I know exactly what that feels like. I watched a couple walk by, holding hands, talking softly. No performance, just presence, and I wondered what it would feel like to be loved like that. No proving, no dimming, no earning it with degrees or perfect behavior, just loved. That was the morning I started writing this story, not for sympathy, not even for justice, but to remember, to take back the narrative. Because for so long, I let others define who I was. I stayed silent so they could be comfortable. But silence doesn't protect you. It just buries you alive. And I was done being buried. Being the youngest judge in my district wasn't a compliment. It was ammunition. The older judges liked to remind me that they'd been practicing law before I was even born. I'd walk into a room and feel the air shift, polite nods, tight smiles, then side glances that said, "Let's see if she can handle it." I didn't try to win them over with charm. I just worked. I was usually the last to leave the courthouse, my light still on after everyone else had packed up. Some nights, the janitor would poke his head in and say, "Still going, Judge?" And I'd smile and wave him off with tired eyes and cold coffee. I wasn't trying to be impressive. I was trying to be prepared. Every case that came across my desk mattered. To someone. And that was enough for me. I remember one particular week, I had 4 back-to-back hearings involving domestic violence. Women with bruised faces and men who blamed stress. Teenagers who sat in the back of the courtroom chewing their nails, waiting to see if they'd be taken from their homes. I didn't just read the case files, I lived them, page by page, note by note. I wanted to understand, not just rule. But not everyone respected that. One afternoon during a lunch break, I overheard 2 senior judges in the lounge. They didn't see me walk in. One of them said, "She's thorough, I'll give her that. But she takes everything too seriously. She'll burn out in 5 years. The other replied, "Well, she is a Dawson. You know how they are. Stubborn." I stood there with my lunch tray, frozen for a second. Then I smiled, sat down across the room, and ate in silence. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of reacting. They weren't wrong, though. I was stubborn. I'd been stubborn since I was a little girl, reading books while other kids played tag, asking questions adults didn't like answering, standing up for classmates who were bullied even when it made me a target. Stubbornness is what got me here. It's what kept me reading those files until 2 a.m., redlining depositions, researching precedents, and writing detailed rulings because I knew that every word I wrote could change the outcome of someone's life. But stubbornness doesn't shield you from loneliness. Sometimes I'd look up from my desk and realize it was pitch dark outside. Everyone had gone home to their families, their dinners, their softness. And I was still there. Alone. Exhausted. Unseen. I didn't complain. I didn't post quotes about burnout or overwork. I just kept moving. because deep down I still believed that if I just gave enough time, energy, perfection, they'd see me. The colleagues, my family, maybe even myself. It's funny how hard we fight for recognition from people who've already decided we don't matter. But back then, I didn't know that yet. I thought I was just one case away from being respected. One more perfect ruling, one more headline, one more reason for someone at the dinner table to say, "We're proud of you, Claire." I was still chasing it, still holding out hope, still telling myself, just a little longer. Then they'll see. But what I didn't realize was that I was waiting for something that wasn't coming. And sometimes, the hardest truth isn't that they don't see you. It's that they don't want to. Respect didn't come all at once, it came in pieces. Quiet, hard-earned, often unnoticed until it was already there. I remember the first time Judge Whitaker asked me to review one of his rulings before it went public. He was known for being sharp, impatient, and allergic to admitting uncertainty. He dropped the file on my desk and said, "You're detail-oriented. Just flag anything you think I should rethink." I nodded, hiding the surprise in my chest. It was a dense fraud case involving a real estate developer and forged city permits. I spent the weekend tearing it apart, cross-referencing every citation, marking where the reasoning felt shaky. Monday morning, I handed it back with my notes. He didn't say thank you, just nodded and walked off. But a week later, I got a call from the clerk's office. They'd updated the published opinion. Almost all my suggestions had been included. That was how it worked in this world. No applause, no banner headlines. Just subtle shifts that told you maybe, just maybe, you were being taken seriously. Another day in the middle of a particularly complicated probate dispute, I noticed something strange about the timeline of the assets being transferred. It was a tiny detail, buried in the third exhibit, an out-of-sequence date on a notarized signature. I flagged it. Turned out it was a forged document. That discovery changed the entire course of the case. The estate was frozen, a criminal investigation was opened, and the local paper ran a short piece about the sharp eye of a young judge in uncovering deception in the legal process. It wasn't front-page news, but my name was there. Claire Dawson, not Lena's sister, not Richard and Diana's daughter. Just me. Every time something like that happened, I told myself, this is it. This is the moment someone will call my parents and say, "You must be so proud." Or Lena will text, "Saw the article. Nice work." But the phone stayed silent. Mom sent me a forwarded recipe from her book club. Lena posted a photo of her new shoes, and still, I kept going. Not for them, not really. There was a certain peace I found in doing the work, in knowing that every night I could close my files and say I gave it my best. That the people who walked into my courtroom, afraid, angry, misunderstood, at least got someone who saw them. That mattered. One afternoon, after a full day of hearings, I was in chambers, finishing up paperwork when Judge Alvarez knocked lightly and stepped in. He was in his 60s, calm. Always carried a leather-bound notebook and a pair of reading glasses too small for his face. He didn't make small talk. He just said, "Your ruling on the Montgomery case. I read it." I braced myself. "You were right to challenge the precedent," he said. "Takes guts. Most would have played it safe." I blinked. "Good work, Dawson." Then he left. That was it. But I sat at my desk for a long time after he was gone. Because in this job, good work meant more than flowers or applause. It meant someone saw what you brought to the table and called it valuable. I didn't cry, but I did smile, not because I needed their approval, but because I was finally starting to believe I was good at this. And sometimes, that belief has to start with you. When things got heavy, there was always Maya. She lived 2 states away and worked as a therapist at a small community clinic. We didn't see each other often, but we talked. Really talked. Usually late at night when the world was quiet enough to hear your own heart beating. We FaceTimed maybe once a week, sometimes less, sometimes more. It wasn't scheduled, it was instinct. One of us would just know when the other needed to hear a familiar voice. That night, after the ruling on the Montgomery case and Judge Alvarez's quiet praise, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine, still in my work clothes. I hadn't eaten dinner. The silence in my apartment felt louder than usual. I picked up my phone and hit the video call button. She answered on the second ring, hair in a messy bun, cat curled on her lap. "Hey, Powerhouse," she said, grinning. "What's up?" I smiled. "You know, just saving the justice system one footnote at a time." She leaned in. Another long day? I nodded. Montgomery ruling went out. Alvarez said I had guts. Her eyebrows shot up. From him? That's basically a standing ovation. I laughed. Then, like always, the laughter gave way to that familiar ache. I stopped. What? She asked gently. I wish someone at home cared, or noticed, or even just asked how my day went. Maya didn't rush to respond. She never did. Instead, she looked at me for a long second, then said, Claire, they don't ask because they already made up their minds about you. And if they acknowledged your strength, they'd have to confront their own smallness. I blinked. You don't need them to clap, she continued. You're not a performance. There was something about the way she said it, like she wasn't trying to cheer me up, just tell the truth. That's the thing, Maya, I said quietly. I never wanted applause, just recognition, the kind that says, I see you. I know how hard this is. She nodded slowly. Then hear it from me. I see you. I know how hard this is. And I'm proud of you, Claire, not for what you do, for who you are. My throat tightened. I looked away. You always say the right thing, I muttered. She smiled. No, I just don't say what they do. I let out a breath. There was a strange comfort in her words. Not flashy, not inflated, just honest, like a hand reaching out in the dark. Maya never treated me like I had to prove anything. She didn't ask about the awards or the rulings or the press. She asked if I'd eaten, if I was sleeping, if I'd done something for joy that week, if I still remembered how to laugh when no one was watching. Sometimes that's the kind of love that heals the deepest. Not the kind that fixes everything, the kind that doesn't require you to break first. Before we hung up, she said, Claire, don't let them convince you that your silence means you're weak. Sometimes silence is the strongest boundary you can set. I stared at the screen long after the call ended. In a world where I was constantly measured, compared, evaluated, Maya gave me something I didn't even know I needed. Permission to just be. And that night, for the first time in a while, I slept without the weight of trying to be enough. I used to try. God, I tried so hard to bring them in. There was a time I thought if I just shared enough, explained enough, they'd finally understand what my work meant, what I had become. That I wasn't just their quiet, odd daughter who always sat with a book at family gatherings. I remember the day I got appointed to the bench. It was huge. Years of law school, clerkships, late nights, pressure. I was 32, the youngest female judge in our circuit. It felt like standing on top of a mountain no one thought I could climb. I drove straight from the courthouse to my parents' house. I didn't call ahead. I just showed up, breathless, smiling, heart pounding. Lena was there. She was visiting from New York, talking about some gala she and her fiancé had attended the night before. Mom was making lemon chicken. Dad was watching golf in the living room. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, still in my suit, holding the official letter in my hand. I got the appointment, I said. Mom turned around, wiping her hands. Appointment? I held up the paper. The judicial seat. They picked me. I'm officially Judge Dawson. For a second, it was quiet. Then Lena laughed. Wait, seriously? You're a judge? Like in a real courtroom? I blinked. Yes. She raised an eyebrow. Wow. Well, look at you, Claire. Making rulings and everything, just don't let it go to your head. Mom smiled politely and said, That's nice, dear. Will you be able to keep your benefits? I stood there, still holding the letter. Dad walked in and asked if anyone wanted a drink. No hug, no congratulations, no pride. Just a vague shrug and a pivot to something else. Like I'd told them I'd bought new tires. Later that night, Lena poured herself a glass of wine and sat next to me. You know, she said, not everything you do has to be a headline. Some of us don't need to announce our lives to feel good about ourselves. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the floor. I never brought up work again. Not with them. I learned that sharing joy was risky in that house. Vulnerability could be twisted into arrogance. Accomplishments were seen as competition. And if you dared to shine too brightly, someone would remind you to dim it down for the sake of harmony. So I stopped. Stopped telling them when I won cases, stopped sharing articles, stopped explaining why I worked so late or why I looked tired at Sunday brunch. It was easier that way. But easier doesn't mean painless. Because silence has its own kind of grief. You start erasing parts of yourself just to fit the mold they've carved out for you. You laugh when you're expected to. nod when you're supposed to. You become a background character in your own story. And after a while, you forget what it felt like to be fully seen. Maya once told me that family is supposed to be where we can take off the armor. But in my family, I always had to wear it tighter. And I think the day I stopped sharing wasn't the day I gave up. It was the day I started protecting myself. I wasn't planning to go to Lena's engagement party. For weeks, I told myself I'd skip it. I'd send flowers, maybe a bottle of champagne, and that would be enough. I'd save myself the awkward smiles, the whispers, the clinking glasses full of comparisons I never asked to be part of. But 2 days before the event, I got a message from my father. Just 4 words. It would mean something. That's how my family communicates. Not with apologies, not with honesty. Just vague, implied obligations wrapped in polite language. So I went. The venue was a renovated art gallery downtown. White walls, gold-trimmed lighting, soft jazz in the background. Everything about it screamed curated elegance, the kind Lena specialized in. She was always good at appearances. Her life looked flawless from the outside. Well-dressed, well-connected, well-rehearsed. I arrived 15 minutes early. Rookie mistake. The room wasn't full yet, and that meant attention. I walked in alone, in a dark green dress I'd bought months ago for a judicial dinner. Sleek, modest, unassuming. People looked my way, and I nodded politely, making my way to the bar for something cold to hold on to. Lena spotted me just as I was sipping. "Oh, wow," she said, brushing air kisses near my cheek. "You came." Her voice was smooth, practiced. The kind you use with coworkers, not siblings. "I said I would," I replied. "Well, I wasn't sure you'd feel comfortable," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "But I'm glad. Just don't talk shop tonight, okay? This is more of a celebratory crowd." I nodded. I'd already promised myself I wouldn't say much. As the room filled up, so did the noise. Waiters carried trays of tiny appetizers with names longer than the food itself. Lena floated through the space like she owned it, which, in a way, she did. She looked stunning, of course. Hair pinned just right, makeup flawless, her diamond ring catching the light every time she moved her hand. She laughed loudly, told the same story 3 times about how Connor proposed on a cliff in Big Sur. I stood near a tall floral arrangement, letting the petals shield me from small talk. No one asked me about work. No one asked me much of anything. My mother approached once, handed me a plate of olives, and said, "Try to enjoy yourself. This is Lena's big night." I nodded again. Smiling is easier than explaining why you don't. I watched Connor from across the room. He seemed nice enough. Tall, polished, good teeth. The kind of man who knew how to look people in the eye and shake hands with confidence. I wondered if he even knew who I was. A few times our eyes almost met, but he'd glance away or move on to the next guest. At one point, Lena stood on a small platform near the front of the gallery, champagne flute in hand. "I just want to say thank you," she began, glowing with practiced gratitude. "To everyone who's been part of our story. To my family, my friends, and of course, to Connor, the man who sees me completely." The room erupted in applause. I clapped too, but I couldn't help but hear the irony in her words. The man who sees her completely. What would that even feel like? To be seen fully, without the need to prove or shrink or translate yourself. I sipped my drink slowly, watching the celebration unfold like a movie I'd seen before, but never starred in. And somewhere inside me, something small shifted. Not bitterness, not jealousy, just a quiet ache. And the beginning of a question I hadn't let myself ask in years. What if this was the last time I ever tried to belong? I was reaching for another glass of sparkling water when I felt a presence beside me. Connor. He smiled politely, the way people do when they're about to make small talk with someone they don't know well. "You're Lena's sister, right?" he asked. His tone was friendly, but something about the way he said it made me pause, like he wasn't entirely sure. I nodded. "Claire." He studied me for a moment. Not in a flirty way, not even curious, more like he was trying to place me in a different context. Then his brow furrowed. "Wait, Claire Dawson?" "Yes," I said slowly. His eyes widened slightly. He tilted his head. "You're Judge Dawson?" The moment the words left his mouth, I felt the temperature in the room drop. He wasn't loud, but he wasn't exactly whispering either. and a few people nearby turned their heads, just enough for it to register. I kept my voice steady. I am. He blinked. You were the presiding judge on that misdemeanor case 2 years ago. I was one of the parties. Now it was coming together. I looked at him fully for the first time, and yes, he was right. He had been on the docket. A civil matter. Nothing dramatic. A dispute with a business partner over contractual fraud. His name hadn't rung any bells earlier because I see hundreds of names a year. But he remembered me. Wow, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't connect the dots until just now. That was a tough day for me. You handled it. Calmly, professionally. I didn't make it easy. No, I said, a faint smile forming. You didn't. He let out a low whistle and shook his head, almost in disbelief. You're Lena's sister, and she never mentioned. His voice trailed off. I could feel the tension wrapping around us, invisible but unmistakable. She doesn't talk much about me, I said quietly. He looked around the room, as if seeing it with new eyes, then back at me, this time not with politeness or curiosity, but with something closer to respect. I just assumed you were in policy or something. I mean, she always says you work in government, but... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. But I did. She prefers I don't talk about my job, I said, sipping from my glass. Apparently it makes people uncomfortable. Connor gave a short, incredulous laugh. Right, because being a judge is so offensive. I didn't reply. For a moment we just stood there, two people in the middle of a very curated party having a very uncurated conversation. I'm sorry, he said finally. I mean it, for not recognizing you, for whatever weird game's being played here. He sounded genuine and oddly unsettled. Before I could say anything else, I noticed the shift. Lena, across the room, staring at us, frozen. Her smile dropped like a stone in water. I met her eyes and didn't look away. She started moving toward us, her heels clicking like warning shots against the polished floor. Connor straightened up, adjusting his jacket. I should get back to the speech lineup, he said. But Claire, Judge Dawson, it was really good to see you again. And just like that, he was gone. Lena reached me seconds later. What was that about? She asked sharply. I shrugged. Just catching up. She looked over her shoulder toward Connor, then back at me. Why did he look surprised? You could almost see the panic behind her lashes. I tilted my head slightly, voice calm. Maybe he didn't expect to find something real at his own engagement party. I didn't wait for her reaction. I just walked away, leaving behind the flicker of a truth she'd spent years trying to bury. Because sometimes, it only takes one sentence to unravel a whole illusion. And sometimes, it only takes being seen, truly seen for the first time to realize just how invisible you've been all along. The silence spread like ink in water. People noticed. They may not have known exactly what was said, but they felt it. That sudden vacuum of energy, the shift from champagne giggles to something colder, sharper. Lena was still standing there, her mouth slightly open, as if trying to process what just happened. Behind her, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years leaned in to whisper something to his wife. Another guest, a woman in a red dress I didn't recognize, turned fully toward me, eyes narrowed in interest. It was the first time all evening that the room paid attention to me. And I wasn't even trying. A waiter brushed past, offering a tray of hors d'oeuvres. No one took one. Lena snapped out of it first. Claire, she said, low and fast. What exactly did you say to Connor? Her voice was tight, controlled. The kind of tone she used when she was afraid things might spiral in front of her carefully curated world. I turned to face her, fully, calmly. No smile, no venom either. He recognized me, I said. Her eyes narrowed. Recognized you? From where? I held her gaze. From court. I presided over one of his cases a few years ago. Now it hit. She blinked hard. You mean you judged him? Like, in your courtroom? I nodded. Yes, he was a party in a civil dispute. I ruled fairly. He remembered. She went pale. I didn't move. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Everything she had built around this narrative, about who I was and wasn't, about what she wanted others to believe about me, was now cracked. Not shattered, not yet, but cracked enough to let the light through. You should have told me, she whispered. Why? I asked softly. You never seemed interested. She didn't answer. Across the room, Connor had rejoined a group of guests, but he kept glancing over. Not with regret, Not with embarrassment, with awareness, as if something had shifted inside him too. Dad was by the bar, drink in hand, talking to an old colleague, but even he was glancing toward us now. Mom was halfway across the room, fidgeting with a napkin, pretending not to hear. Lena stepped closer. "This is my engagement party," she hissed. "I know," I said. "That's why I came. To celebrate. To be polite. To stay quiet." My voice didn't rise. If anything, it lowered. "But I can't help it if the truth walks into the room." She looked like she wanted to scream but didn't dare. And that's when I realized this wasn't about me stealing her spotlight. It was about her losing control of the story. For years, she'd painted me as the lesser one, the serious one, the background character who didn't know how to be fun or lovable or impressive. She had made me small to feel bigger. And as long as I stayed silent, it worked. But tonight, a single sentence, "I am a judge," rewrote everything. I turned to leave the circle we'd created in the middle of the party. As I did, someone tapped my arm. A woman in her 50s, hair silver at the temples, wearing an emerald brooch. "I just wanted to say," she said gently, "my niece went through a divorce last year. Said your courtroom was the only place she felt safe. She remembers you." I nodded, surprised. "She said you didn't make her feel ashamed. That matters." Then the woman patted my hand and walked away. I stood still for a moment, letting the words settle. It wasn't validation I had come for, but maybe it found me anyway, and for the first time in a long time I felt tall in my own skin. Not louder, not flashier, just steady, seen, and that was more than enough. The music kept playing, but everything else paused. It was strange how a room could be filled with sound, light, and conversation, yet still feel completely silent, like everyone was pretending they hadn't heard what they just heard. I stood by the side table, fingering the condensation on my glass. My sister was still recovering from the blow. She moved through the space with forced grace, her shoulders tighter, her laughter thinner. She kept glancing toward me, then away, like I was a glitch in her perfect night she couldn't edit out. People didn't know what to say to me now. That was new. For years, I had been easy to ignore at family events. The quiet one. The helpful one. The woman people talked over. But now, I was visible, and that visibility came with discomfort. My father approached me at one point. He looked uneasy, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find a place to land. "I didn't know," he said finally. I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't know what?" He shifted. "About your position, that you were a judge." I gave him a half smile. "It's been a while." He cleared his throat. "You should have said something." I tilted my head. "Would it have mattered?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. His silence answered the question for him. My mother didn't come over at all. She stood by the fireplace, eyes darting between guests, trying to salvage the evening with meaningless small talk. But even she knew, the energy had changed. And Lena avoided me. Not entirely. She hovered. She watched. But she never came close again. Her cheeks were flushed, not from celebration, but from something else. Embarrassment? Anger? I couldn't tell. Maybe both. I saw Connor in the corner speaking with his brother. He looked more thoughtful than before. Calmer. As if some internal equation had just balanced in a way he didn't expect. I set my glass down and smoothed my dress. Then I picked up my clutch, walked slowly across the gallery, and headed for the exit. No one stopped me. No goodbyes, no protests. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. I didn't need to. My leaving said everything. On the sidewalk outside, the night air was cool and steady. The sounds of traffic felt honest in a way the party hadn't. I took a breath. Then another. For a long time I had confused silence with peace. I had told myself that walking on eggshells was an act of love, that staying small kept the family together, that shrinking myself was noble, but the truth, it was exhausting. And tonight, for the first time, I let it all drop. No confrontation, no performance, just the quiet decision to stop shrinking. A Lyft pulled up at the curb. I got in, gave my address, and leaned back against the seat. The city passed outside the window in streaks of gold and gray. I thought about Maya, about the way she always said, "You can't make people see you if they're committed to seeing something else." And I realized I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad either. I was clear. Clarity is underrated. It doesn't burn, it doesn't explode, it doesn't scream. It just stands. And in that car, under the calm glow of passing streetlights, I sat with it like an old friend. No tears, no regret. Just the quiet satisfaction of a woman who finally understood her worth had never been up for vote. I didn't expect to hear from Connor. Not that night. Not after the awkwardness, the glances, the shift in Lena's voice from playful to poisonous. But sometime around noon the next day, my phone buzzed with a message. "Can I talk to you? Coffee? My treat?" Just 10 words. I stared at them for longer than I should have, then typed back, "1 hour, Jameson Cafe, come as yourself." I got there early. It was the kind of quiet neighborhood place that didn't care how you dressed or how long you stayed. A chalkboard menu, mismatched mugs, and a barista who didn't rush you. I sat by the window with my usual, black coffee, no sugar. Connor arrived 5 minutes late, still in his engagement party version of himself. Polished jacket, clean shave, but with tired eyes. He saw me and offered a cautious smile. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, sitting down. I nodded. He hesitated, then leaned forward, both palms flat on the table. "Last night, I didn't know what to say. That makes 2 of us." He let out a breath. "You know, when I first started dating Lena, she mentioned having a younger sister who was kind of serious, reserved, private." I raised an eyebrow. "Sounds about right." "But she never said you were a judge," he added quickly, "or that you've built a real career, or that people admire you. It was always this vague brush-off. Claire does legal stuff. She's kind of boring." I gave a short laugh. "Boring is safe. It fits the version of me they're comfortable with." He shook his head. "I should have noticed. I mean, when I saw you last night, when it hit me who you were, I felt like an idiot. Like I'd been reading the wrong script this whole time." I didn't say anything. Sometimes silence makes people speak more honestly. "I owe you an apology," he continued. "Not just for how I treated you in court, I was a mess back then, but for not asking more, for not questioning why your family talks about you the way they do." I looked at him, really looked. His eyes were clear, steady, no performative regret, just a man untangling himself from a story that suddenly didn't feel true anymore. "Most people don't ask," I said finally. "It's easier to accept the version you're given." He nodded. "But I was wrong," he said. "The version I got was incomplete." We sat in silence for a moment, not awkward, just still. Then he added more quietly, "Lena's great at presenting things, but last night I started wondering, what else don't I know? What else has been edited?" I tilted my head. "You're not asking me to answer that for you, are you?" He smiled faintly. "No, I think I need to figure it out myself." Good. That was the first intelligent thing he'd said all day. He reached for his coffee, took a sip, then said something that stayed with me. "You carry yourself like someone who doesn't need to be explained. That's rare." I met his eyes. "Maybe I just got tired of shrinking." He nodded. "I get that. I think I've been pretending not to shrink, but really, I'm just good at playing tall." That made me smile. Not because it was clever, but because it was honest. When we stood up to leave, he didn't offer a hug or make it weird. He just said, "Thank you for showing me something real." And I replied, "You're welcome, don't waste it." Outside, the air was crisp again, brighter somehow. I didn't feel vindicated, I didn't need to. What I felt was simpler, seen, and not for what I could prove, but for who I already was. Lena couldn't sleep. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, except for the occasional tick of the antique clock in the hallway, one she had insisted on keeping from her parents' house, a symbol of tradition, of image. She sat in the living room in her silk robe, makeup wiped clean, hair tied up like she was trying to hold herself together. A half-finished glass of wine rested on the coffee table, untouched since midnight. Everything looked perfect, and nothing felt right. She replayed the moment again and again. Connor's face when he recognized Claire, the way he said her name, like it meant something more. The stunned hush that spread through the room when Claire simply said, "I'm a judge." No raised voice, no drama, just truth. And Lena's carefully built world tilted. She had spent years being the center of attention, the daughter who got it right, the one people praised. Her career in marketing was flashy, digestible, easy to boast about at dinner parties. Her social media looked like a curated museum of winning. But that night, in just a few words, Claire reminded everyone that depth doesn't need decoration. Lena had watched from across the room, frozen in place, unable to move. She wanted to blame Claire for ruining her night. But the truth gnawed at her. Claire hadn't ruined anything. She had simply stopped hiding. Lena turned to the dark window, her reflection faint and uncertain. For the first time in a long while, she saw not a successful woman but a scared girl pretending to be bulletproof. The memories came uninvited. Claire at 14, staying up late studying, while Lena breezed through high school with charm and barely any effort. Claire, softly proud, showing Dad her first award for debate, and Lena teasing her, calling her Miss Morality. She hadn't meant it cruelly. Or maybe she had. Back then, she thought Claire's seriousness was something to fix, or laugh off. But over the years, it had become easier to just ignore her accomplishments, to minimize them before anyone else could, to make sure people knew she was the sister with sparkle. She wrapped her arms around herself and leaned back into the couch. It was exhausting, always performing, always protecting the image. And what stung the most was this. Claire hadn't come to steal her spotlight. She never did. She had simply shown up, as herself. And that had been enough to undo everything Lena thought she controlled. A tear slipped down her cheek, surprising her. She hadn't cried in years. Certainly not for Claire, but now there was this unfamiliar ache in her chest. Not jealousy, not resentment, shame. Real, quiet, humbling shame. She had built a version of Claire that made her feel safe, predictable, one-dimensional, quietly competent but never threatening. But that version didn't survive last night, and maybe it never should have existed in the first place. She stared at her phone, considering. It would be easy to text something short, a throwaway apology. But that wouldn't be enough. Not now. Not after the years of silence, dismissal, and polite cruelty disguised as sisterly banter. She knew she had to say it. Not through a screen, not with an emoji, face to face. For once, Lena would have to be the one who stopped pretending. It was a crisp morning, the kind where the sun peeked gently through the trees, not blinding but golden, almost hesitant. The park was nearly empty except for a few early joggers and a mother coaxing her toddler into a stroller. Claire sat on a bench near the pond, a coffee cup warming her hands. She had gotten there early. Again. Old habits didn't die easily. She didn't know if Lena would actually show, and honestly, she wasn't sure if she wanted her to. The hurt from the night of the engagement party still lingered, though not sharp like before. It had settled somewhere deeper, more like a bruise than a wound. Still there. Still tender. She took a slow sip of her coffee just as footsteps approached behind her. Lena, wearing sunglasses, dressed in sleek activewear, trying her best to look composed. But her posture gave her away, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, like she'd rehearsed this a dozen times and still didn't trust herself to get it right. Claire didn't stand. Lena sat beside her with a space between them that felt both too wide and too narrow. For a moment, neither spoke. Birds chirped. A dog barked in the distance. Life went on. Then Lena exhaled, a long breath that carried years with it. "I owe you an apology." Claire looked over, surprised by the directness. Lena took off her sunglasses and met her gaze. No makeup, no armor. "I've made you feel small for a long time, dismissed your work, laughed at things that mattered to you, and I told myself it was harmless, that it was just how sisters are. But it wasn't harmless, it was cruel, and I knew better." Claire didn't interrupt. She let Lena speak because this wasn't something she could fix. It had to come from Lena. "I think I needed to be the shiny one, the interesting one, the one people noticed, because honestly," her voice cracked slightly, "I didn't know who I was without that." She swallowed hard. "But that night, when Connor looked at you the way I always wanted him to look at me, it shook something in me, not just jealousy, something deeper, shame maybe." Claire stared straight ahead at the water. Her voice was soft but steady. "You never needed to dim my light to shine." Lena nodded, her eyes moist. "I see that now." Silence again. Not uncomfortable, just necessary. Claire finally turned to her, her expression unreadable. "You know, I spent so many years trying not to make waves. I thought staying quiet kept the peace, but it only kept me invisible." Lena whispered, "I saw you, I did. I just didn't know what to do with what I saw." Claire's eyes softened. I never needed you to do anything. I just wanted to be treated like I mattered. Lena wiped a tear with the back of her hand. No drama, just truth. I'm proud of you, Claire. Not because you're a judge, but because you never stopped being who you are, even when no one clapped. Claire smiled faintly, a small, real smile. Thank you, she said. They sat there for a while, not fixing everything, not rewriting the past, but starting something new, a kind of quiet understanding, a different kind of bond, not built on comparison, but on truth, and maybe for the first time, that was enough. A few weeks passed. Life, as it tends to do, moved forward. Hearings were scheduled, cases reviewed. Claire returned to her daily rhythm, early mornings, coffee in the car, long afternoons behind a bench where truth mattered and respect wasn't optional. But something had shifted. Not outside, inside. She still walked into courtrooms filled with skeptical eyes and colleagues who underestimated her. But there was a quiet in her spirit now. Not silence. Stillness. The kind that comes when the war you've been fighting wasn't with the world, but with the part of yourself that kept asking for permission to exist. Then, one Sunday, her phone buzzed. Family dinner. Just us. 6 p.m. Hope you'll come. Mom Claire read it twice. The message was so casual, like it wasn't carrying the weight of years. She considered not going, but something about the way it was worded, no expectation, no guilt, made her pause. And so she went. The house looked the same, cream siding, overgrown hydrangeas, that little crack in the driveway no one had fixed for a decade. But the atmosphere felt different. Inside, the dining room wasn't set with the usual polish. No crystal, no formal place cards, just mismatched plates, a casserole in the center, and soft jazz playing from a speaker in the corner. It felt lived in. Less performance. More people. Her father opened the door and smiled. Not the distracted kind he wore during football games, but one that actually reached his eyes. I heard you ruled on that property dispute in Suffolk County, he said. That's a tough case. Claire blinked. You read about that? I may have a Google alert now, he said, chuckling. She laughed, stunned. A real involuntary laugh. Her mother stepped out of the kitchen, apron still tied, cheeks slightly pink from the oven heat. I made your favorite, she said, holding up a dish of roasted carrots, and I didn't overcook them this time. Claire softened. She took a seat across from Lena, who gave her a small, knowing nod. There wasn't a big speech, no dramatic apology circle, no moment where everyone held hands and cried, but there were questions, real ones. Her dad asked what it felt like to write an opinion that might change someone's life. Her mom wanted to know how she handled stress in the courtroom. Lena stayed mostly quiet, but her eyes never left Claire when she spoke. For the first time, Claire wasn't just being heard. She was being listened to. And not because she demanded it, but because she stopped hiding. Sometimes families don't change all at once. There's no switch that flips, no sudden enlightenment. Sometimes healing shows up in the smallest things, a second helping passed without comment, a father leaning in when his daughter talks, a mother watching, quietly proud, as the daughter she misunderstood for years sits at her table with confidence in her bones. That night, Claire left with no fireworks, no grand declarations. But as she stepped outside and closed the door behind her, she realized something had finally broken through. Not them. Her. She had stopped waiting for their validation. And somehow, in that quiet act of letting go, space was created for something real to grow, something that didn't need applause, just presence. The courthouse was quiet. Most days the building buzzed with movement, heels clicking down marble floors, courtroom doors swinging, voices echoing off high ceilings. But this was late Friday, and the world outside was already drifting toward the weekend. Claire sat alone in her chambers. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, casting a soft, golden glow across her desk. The kind of light that didn't demand anything, just warmed whatever it touched. She leaned back in her chair, heels kicked off, a mug of lukewarm tea in her hand. Her black robe hung neatly on the coat rack beside her. Her desk was cluttered with case files, sticky notes, a half-eaten granola bar. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. She glanced at a framed photo on the corner of her desk. It was from her law school graduation. In the picture, she was smiling at the camera, cap slightly askew, holding her degree. No one else was in the frame. At the time, that had felt like a statement. Now it just looked like peace. Outside the window, the city moved on. Cars humming, shadows stretching long across rooftops. Claire watched it all in silence, breathing in the stillness. Then she closed her eyes, and her voice, steady and clear, filled the room in voiceover. I used to think that being seen, really seen, meant being celebrated. That the only way to feel worthy was to be praised, admired, respected. Her fingers traced the edge of her teacup slowly. But I've learned that the truest kind of value doesn't need applause. It's quiet, unshakable. It comes from knowing who you are, even when no one's watching, even when no one's clapping. She opened her eyes, focused on the light drifting through the blinds. I spent years waiting for someone else to validate my place at the table. I waited for the proud of you that never came. I shrank to fit the silence, smiled to keep the peace. Her voice softened, almost like a whisper to her younger self. But the truth is, I didn't need to be loud to matter. I didn't need permission to stand tall. I just needed to stop asking if I was enough. She rose slowly, walking toward the window. The city stretched out before her, familiar yet distant. The buildings weren't impressive anymore. Not like they used to be when she first started. They were just background now. Claire placed her hand against the glass. Some people will never see you the way you deserve, not because you're not brilliant, but because they're not ready. She closed her eyes again, letting the light fall on her face. But that's okay, because you're not here to convince anyone. A soft smile curled at her lips. You're here to live. And then, silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ache anymore. The kind that feels earned. The camera slowly pulled back from the window, moving outward. Claire standing alone, strong and centered in her space. Not smaller than it, not swallowed by it. Just there. Unapologetically present. In the light that had always been hers. Some changes arrive like thunder. Others slip in like the morning sun. Soft, quiet, and undeniable. For Claire, it was the latter. Nothing dramatic happened after that evening in her office. There was no parade, no viral article, no surprise awards. But life began to feel different. More hers. The shift was small at first, like the way she walked into her courtroom. Shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. Not trying to prove anything, just doing the job she loved. There were new cases, new challenges. Her calendar stayed full. Judges older than her still questioned her decisions, but now she didn't flinch. She answered with clarity, not defensiveness. She knew her value wasn't up for debate. And outside the courtroom? That's where things got even quieter and sweeter. Family dinners happen more often now, not extravagant ones. Just meals where no one tried to impress, where the table talk didn't turn into a scoreboard. Her father started asking about her cases with genuine interest. Her mother would pack leftovers in Tupperware like she used to in college. Simple things, but sacred in their own way. And Lena? She kept showing up. Sometimes with coffee, sometimes with awkward stories about wedding planning stress. Once, she just sat beside Claire in silence while they watched a rerun of an old court drama. They weren't best friends, but they were rebuilding, brick by honest brick. One Thursday evening, as Claire stepped out of her office building, she paused on the steps and looked up. The sky was painted in that rare, fleeting mix of lavender and gold. A reminder that beauty doesn't need to last to be real. Her phone buzzed. A message from Maya. "Just checking in, proud of you. Always." Claire smiled. She started walking. Past the courthouse, past the coffee shop that knew her order, past the park bench where she used to sit and wonder if she was invisible. Now she knew better. Being invisible wasn't about how others saw her. It was about how she saw herself. And she had finally decided to see herself, clearly, fully, without apology. She passed a storefront window and caught her reflection. She didn't look different, but she felt different. And sometimes, that's everything. Claire started waking up a little earlier. Not because she had to, but because the quiet hours before the city came alive felt sacred now. She'd brew her coffee slowly, sit by the window, and let the light spill across her kitchen floor. Sometimes she read. Sometimes she didn't. Just being was enough. She was learning to enjoy her own company. It hadn't always been that way. For years, Claire had filled every hour with noise, briefings, research, hearings, errands, proving, pushing, performing. There had been a quiet fear underneath it all, that if she stopped, even for a second, the emptiness would catch up to her. But it didn't. Not anymore. Now, when she stopped, something else arrived. Peace. One Saturday afternoon, Claire found herself in a bookstore she used to visit during law school, the kind with creaky floors and handwritten staff picks. She wandered the aisles without purpose, letting her fingers glide across spines like they were old friends. In the back corner, near a dusty poetry section, a woman in her 70s was reading to a little girl. The child was curled beside her, eyes wide, mouthing every word softly. Claire stood still, quietly watching. There was something grounding about the moment, something that reminded her life wasn't just courtrooms and closed cases. It was also stories and softness and moments that never made it into any resume. She smiled to herself and pulled a book from the shelf, a collection of essays on identity and quiet strength. She bought it and took it to a nearby cafe, where she sat by the window and read slowly, underlining a single sentence. "You do not need to be loud to be powerful." That line sat with her for days. She started writing again. Not legal briefs, journal entries, thoughts, dreams, frustrations she used to bury, memories she was finally ready to visit without bitterness. And little by little, she noticed how the world responded. Her colleagues still respected her. But now, younger clerks came to her not just for answers but for perspective, for guidance. Maya sent her a playlist titled "For Soft Mornings and Strong Women." Lena mailed her a handwritten card on no special occasion. Inside was a single line, "I see you, Claire, I really do." She kept it in her wallet. There were still hard days, still moments when old doubts crept in, but now, Claire met them differently. Not with fear, with grace, because she had stopped chasing a version of herself that was palatable to others. She was creating one that felt true, not for the spotlight, but for her own reflection. It was late afternoon again. The city moved at its usual rhythm, cars crawling through intersections, dogs tugging at their leashes, people talking on phones like the world couldn't wait. Claire sat at a cafe patio near the courthouse, a folder of case notes beside her, untouched. Instead, she watched a little boy across the street chasing bubbles, laughing like it was the most important thing in the world. And maybe, in that moment, it was. Her phone buzzed. An email from a legal journal requesting her commentary on a recent high-profile ruling. She didn't open it. Not yet. It could wait. For once, nothing felt urgent. The sun shifted behind a row of buildings, casting soft streaks of amber across the sidewalk. She reached for her glass of water and took a slow sip, savoring even that small gesture. She'd spent so many years thinking life was a courtroom, that every interaction required evidence, every relationship demanded a case to be made. But now, she was learning to live in the recess between verdicts, to exist without the constant proving. Later that evening, Claire returned to her apartment. She dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off her shoes, and lit a candle on the windowsill. A soft scent of cedar and orange filled the air. She stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair back into a bun, and caught her own reflection. She looked older than the girl in her law school photo. A few fine lines around the eyes, a deeper calm in the gaze. But for the first time, she didn't rush past the mirror. She stayed, looked, and smiled. That night, before bed, she opened her journal and wrote just one sentence. "I am no longer waiting to be chosen." Then she closed the book and turned off the light. The city outside her window pulsed on, unaware. But inside, in that quiet room, a woman rested. Not because she was finished, but because she was finally free. Not from the world, from the weight of needing to be more than she already was. Claire had found her light, not in applause, not in titles, but in the steady quiet knowing that she was enough, just as she was. And that was more than enough. Claire never set out to be an example. She just wanted to breathe, to live a life that wasn't constantly filtered through someone else's expectations. But something funny happens when you stop pretending. You give others permission to do the same. It began subtly. A young court clerk, newly assigned to her chambers, stayed behind one evening to ask how Claire handled difficult decisions. "I watch how you work," she admitted. "You're calm but not cold, firm but not cruel. I want to be that kind of judge." Claire was caught off guard, not by the compliment, but by how deeply it moved her. She had once felt like a shadow in her own home, invisible despite all her achievements. And now here was someone saying, I see you. I learned from you." She didn't say much in response, just nodded and thanked her. But that night she stayed late at her desk, not because she had to, but because she realized she wasn't just doing a job, she was shaping something. A few weeks later, she was invited to speak at a small women's legal forum. Nothing flashy, just a quiet event at a local community center. She almost declined. Public speaking wasn't her favorite. But she said yes. And when she stood at the front of that modest room in front of rows of women, some just out of law school, others returning to the field after raising kids, she didn't read from a script. She told the truth about being underestimated, about family silence, about the long road to believing in your own voice. There were no standing ovations, but there were teary eyes, nods, the kind of stillness that says, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." Afterward, one woman approached her quietly. "I used to think my story didn't matter," she said. "But listening to you, maybe it does." Claire smiled. "It does," she said. "And so do you." It wasn't just strangers who started to notice. One evening, Claire received a voice message from Maya. She sounded tired, like she'd just finished a long day, but there was a warmth in her voice that cut through the static. "Hey, just wanted to say, I watched the clip of your talk. Twice, maybe 3 times. You said something about not waiting to be chosen anymore, and I swear it felt like you were speaking straight to me. I've been stuck, Claire, waiting. For what? I don't even know. But after hearing you, I applied for the job I kept telling myself I wasn't ready for. Anyway, just thank you. You lit something in me." Claire sat with that message for a long time. Sometimes you never know what your healing gives others permission to do. Even Lena was different now. She still had her sharp edges. That would never change. But there was a softness that peeked through more often. Less competition, more curiosity. She called one Sunday morning just to chat. No agenda. Just wanted to know how Claire's week had gone. Claire almost dropped her coffee mug. Later that month, Lena showed up at Claire's apartment with a pie. Store-bought. A little too sweet. But it didn't matter. They sat on the couch and talked. Really talked. About childhood. About pressure. About the roles they had both played so well for so long. Lena confessed something then. Not dramatic, just honest. "I think I pushed you away because you didn't need to perform. And I did. I was jealous of that. But the truth is, I wish I had your peace." Claire looked at her sister for a moment, and then simply said, "It's still available." That line stayed with both of them. Because peace, she had learned, wasn't reserved for the lucky. It was a choice. A decision you made every day, to show up as yourself, to let go of needing everyone's applause, to speak even when your voice trembled. It wasn't loud. It didn't trend. But it changed everything. The sun was setting behind the city skyline. Claire stood at the rooftop of her building, a cup of tea in hand, the air cool against her skin. From up here, everything below looked smaller. Cars, crowds, concerns. It all blended into one soft hum of life. She breathed in. There was no grand finale, no parade, no breakthrough headline, just stillness and clarity, the kind that only comes when you stop asking for permission to exist. She closed her eyes and let her thoughts settle. For a long time, I thought being strong meant being loud, being visible, being praised. But now I know, true strength is quieter than we think. It's found in grace, in presence, in choosing to keep showing up even when no one claps, especially then. She opened her eyes. Lights flickered on across the city. One window at a time. Ordinary, beautiful. Her voice came again. Steady, true. You don't have to fight to be seen. You just have to stop dimming your own light. And with that, she turned to go inside. But the light followed her in. Your value is not measured by how loudly the world sees you, but by how deeply you see yourself. The quietest confidence is often the strongest.